Dr. Subramanian Swamy, of course, is known as one of the most renowned economists of the country and has his training in statistics, first from Hindu College, then from the Indian Statistical Institute, followed by a PhD in economics from Harvard University. Dr. Roxna Swamy has her initial training in mathematics, which was followed up by a postgraduate in applied mathematics at Harvard University and Indian Institute of Technology at Delhi. She received her doctorate thereafter in 1972 from the latter institute. And while I would want ma'am to shed light upon what at least seems to me an extremely complex one line, I will make an attempt to at least read it out. And I tried my best to make the best sense of it. But being a mere economics student, I couldn't grasp the best of it. Her doctoral thesis was titled Stability of Plane Porcello Flow of a Slightly Elastico Viscous Liquid. Now, just the reading of that, my first instinct has to be that I'm sure of the pronunciation of the words that I'm reading out from the flap of her book. Today, we will be discussing the proclamation of the internal emergency. And more specifically, I would want ma'am to share some parts, some excerpts from her book, which I've been reading and which I've thoroughly enjoyed. And most certainly we'll be getting in Dr. Subramanian Swamy's points of view on his adventures during those days, if at all that word would do justice to everything that was happening. So Dr. Swamy and Dr. Swamy, welcome. A very warm welcome to both of you. We're having some difficulty with the audio. Aman, Kishika, can we check with the audio, please? There's some difficulty with the audio. Listen. Yes, I think.
Can you hear now?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, I think now the audio. Yes.
A truly active role in the emergency I never played. But there's always scope for, assisting people who are fighting the emergency. Like, for instance, after Swamy went underground, which was on the very first day of the emergency, what I really was doing was liaising with him, putting people in touch with him, even fetching and carrying errands. Like, for instance, I had never till then ever driven at night. It was one of those things I was really scared of doing. But once the emergency came about and one had to work at night, one drove at night. I mean, one didn't do it with one's eyes shut even. My first real job in the emergency was really not concerned with Swamy at all. In the first few days of the emergency, when Swamy was not around, I was a lot of the time at my sister's house in Vithalbha Patel House. There, since her husband was a very enthusiastic supporter of the fight against the emergency, he managed to actually capture a printing press, which technically belonged to the Chaudhry Charan Singh's party. We captured it, took it up to his apartment, set it up, and started printing a newspaper there. The catch was that the printing press made a huge amount of noise, and we had to somehow find a way of keeping the noise from being heard down the corridors of Vittal Patel House. So what my sister decided to do was a full blast in the hope that it would disguise the sound. One day she handed back the printing press to the Chaudhry Charan Singh's party and closed it down. After that, I didn't really do anything until Nanaji decided that he needed somebody to go abroad and leave. Nanaji Deshmukh. Nanaji Deshmukh was really running the underground. And I mean, he did a marvelous job of liaising with everybody. and in fact, finding work for everybody to do. And apparently there weren't so many people with a legitimate passport, which was unexpired. And he decided to send me abroad to years people in America, which I knew very well, and in England, where there was a very large RSS audience and set up. So that's what I did. The people I got in touch with, basically, I had my own group of people who put me up, looked after my expenses, drove me around, things like that. Those were my personal friends, or in one case, my brother. What the RSS did was take over what I passed on to them and spread it around and work out an association which would then carry out an agitation in England. Once that was set up, I went off to Washington, where again, I had a friend, Satish Singh, with whom I was staying, and then to a place outside Pennsylvania, where Mitra was a student.
He's finance minister now.
He's finance minister of West Bengal now. And then I went to my own second hometown, Cambridge in Massachusetts, where again, I had people I was staying with, the Nayaks. And at each of these places, I tried to get in touch with local people, Americans, to try and get them interested in fighting the emergency with us. For instance, in Massachusetts, there was Paul Samuelson and Simon Kuznets, both very devoted friends of Swamy. There was Marshall Goldman and his wife. There was to some extent McFarker, I think, too. Anyway, all of them said very clearly that there's very little we can do, but just in case Swamy is ever arrested and incarcerated, we will carry out an agitation to get him released. Anyway, I set up the association there. We worked out who was going to communicate with who. We worked out code systems because, it wasn't like a day where you can do things over the internet. Literally, you had to rely on the post office and for emergencies on the telephone service to communicate. I think now you've heard enough about how things started, and you might be more interested in hearing what Swamy had to say.
Hindi or English? All the people here want me in Hindi. You speak in Hindi or in English?
So we're fine with both, sir. We're fine with both.
All right. Then I'll continue with English. You see, the thing is that when I went underground, I was a member of parliament. And there was a lookout notice for me. I escaped because originally I was, the day before the emergency, I was in Bangalore. So the visa warrant was taken out in Bangalore and they were hunting for me in Bangalore. And by then I'd come to Delhi and then addressed that. I, in fact, I was the chairman of the meeting, which was held on 25th June, the classic one, which Jayaprakash Narayan addressed, and then that set the motion for the emergency. Then from underground, I was staying with Nanaji Deshmukh, and after 2 months of his extraordinary work on setting up an underground, he got arrested. So I became alone, and of course by alone I went around the country in disguise. I was disguised as a Sikh, so and I traveled to various parts. But then Jayaprakash Narayan sent a message. He had by then his kidneys had been become non-functional, and maybe it was induced and became non-functional. He was in hospital in Chandigarh. So he sent a message to the head, the new head in place of Nanaji Deshmukh, an RSS General Secretary, called Madhav Mule. And Madhav Mule got the message that what is the point in keeping Swamy here? He has got enormous recognition in the United States, and England and Canada. So he should go and campaign there. So I raised the question, what is the use of campaigning there when the country is in our country is the one that is affected. JP said them in his message that you will be able to speak on BBC, Voice of America, and that is heard by all of us in India. And they beat the censorship. Whereas in India, any media is all under censorship. So to beat the censorship, you go. So I went to London due to Roxna's work already. There was an organization waiting for me. So we addressed a meeting. Then I got a huge demonstration in the famous Hyde Park in London. So a recognition came that agitation has started abroad. Went to America, and there, there were all the RSS people who were in various professions. They came together, we created an organization. And then out of 50 states of United States, 50 states of the United States, I went and addressed meetings in about half those, almost 24 to be exact. And a whole wave started. And a creation, and then New York Times started writing editorials, and Washington Post, etc. All the influential papers started writing editorials. The important thing was, because I went, the propaganda of the Indian embassy that no leader is in jail, only smugglers, dakus, thieves, anti-national, they are in jail. And when I told them, no, Jayaprakash is in jail, Morarji Desai is in jail, Nanaji Deshmukh is in jail, all these big names, they're all in jail. And in the case of Morarji Desai, even though at that time he was almost 80 years old, he's been kept in solitary confinement. I even identified the jail in Sonipat, not in Sona, in this area near, after Qutub you can go. That's a resort, but in the dark bungalow, he was kept in solitary confinement. Jayaprakash, of course, was in solitary confinement, but because his kidneys failed, therefore he had to be put in hospital. Chandrasekhar was in solitary confinement. So all this facts started coming out. Then stories about tortures of Vidyarthi Parishad boys and so on. And the fact that there are 140,000 people in jail without trial, without even a charge sheet, nothing, just Misa warrant, and they were put inside, and their families were all being ruined. So this atmosphere, all the Western nations, including Australia and Ireland and all they all decided to speak to Mrs. Gandhi and say, what are you doing? And started putting pressure. So at that time, there was another minus point that came, because I had spent 6 months after escaping from India. I spent 6 months in America. The problem that no activity is taking place in India, because we believe in non-violence. So non-violence are underground. So except circulating stories, news items, etc., there was nothing we could do. We could not do anything. We came outside to do satyagraha, we'll all be arrested. Like the Akalis were getting arrested on a daily basis. But we could do it because Mrs. Gandhi was particularly harsh on RSS. So what to do? That question came up. And then they naturally, Congress and the embassy spread the rumor, no, everything is over. People have accepted an emergency, and we are a third world country. There's no democracy and so on. Democracy is not appropriate just now for India. This kind of propaganda was let loose. So I had to do something by which to show that there is an underground. Nobody believed there's an underground. Why the underground is keeping quiet? So I thought, I have to do something. So I came up with this plan that I will come to India and enter Parliament and make a short speech and disappear again and go back to America. Everybody said it is impossible to do it. Yeah, there's a big arrest warrant in your name. Hey, you have been declared a proclaimed offender and so on. And how can you do all that? So I shall work it out. And after long thinking, I went back to India on the 5th of August. And on 10th of August, I walked into Parliament. In the gate, in the door of Parliament, the watch and ward staff of the Parliament was there. They saw me. Now they didn't know what to do, because the arrest warrant is was in Parliament Street police station. And unless they know I am required under the law to be arrested, what could they asked me, Swami Sahab, aap chut gaye? I said, 20 सूत्री कार्यक्रम में दस्तखत करने से कोई भी छूट सकता है. You know, I didn't sign it, but I created the impression that I have come out. So it's, ठीक है साहब, बाहर अंदर रहकर क्या फायदा, आप जाइए. So I went into the house. And when I went to the house, of course, the entire opposition had boycotted, so all the benches were empty. But the Congress was there in full strength. And when I walked in, they were stunned. How did he come? And that time the obituary was going on. And the last name was being read of the person died in the intercession period. So I got up and said, I have a point of order. Democracy has also died and you have not put that in the obituary list. And the president, the chairman said, no, point of order. And he asked everybody to stand for 2 minutes silence. That gave me an opportunity to come out. And I came out and drove to the railway station and then went to Bombay undetected. And then from Bombay, arrangement was made to take me to Nepal, because in Nepal, the King Birendra was a student at Harvard when I was teaching there. And he said, once he comes to Nepal, I'll take care of him. So then I was put on a Royal Nepal Airlines plane to Bangkok. From there, I went back to America. This destroys Mrs. Gandhi's credibility completely. And they said, what is this? The man is most wanted in the law. There is a reward in his name. There is a notice to the Interpol. And the man goes in, walks in, makes a speech and disappears. And so Mrs. Gandhi began to feel, and she herself told me later on when she came back to power, she told me that that is the event which made me convinced that everything is not good. All these people were telling me that everything is not good. People are liking the emergency. And the fact that you could do this means a lot of people have helped you. And therefore, she said, I began thinking of the elections. That's how she declared the election. This in total is the thing. And of course, we are all fired up because I could do this. It was all over the country. In the underground newspapers were spreading it. And so naturally I became the hero of the emergency at that time. Any questions?
Yes. Sir, I have been reading ma'am's book, and she recounts that like a thriller chase. Okay, if at all you were to be followed, then we would meet at this particular point. And if you were not to be followed, then we'll meet at Birla Mandir. And from there, the rest of the journey will continue. But what I think I've gone through almost the entirety of it. The two parts that I find most fascinating, and obviously as a student of law, one, I think what ma'am recounts, this is about her two daughters in pages 143 and 144. We do know the passport case, the great 7-judge bench judgment in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India. And perhaps if ma'am would not have been occupied in other places at that time, we could have had a certain writ petition titled in the matter of Gitanjali Swamy through her mother and natural guardian versus the Union of India. Ma'am, could you tell us a bit about that? Post that, we will look at Q's suspension of her passport and being a threat to public interest at such a tender age.
Yeah. Actually, people don't realize it, but the real sufferers during the emergency were my two little girls. Because, they suddenly found themselves with a father who was underground. I was a harassed student of law who was rushing all over the place trying to keep things going. My sister had a husband in jail and she herself was holding down another job and, trying. And all of us, literally everybody in our household, from the cook upwards, was being followed around by the police. And even these two little girls used to have police escorts wherever they went. So I thought that the best thing would be if I could get Gitanjali at least abroad. So I, her passport had sort of lapsed or something like that. So I put in an application for a fresh passport. It was returned with the reply that, they were refusing her passport as a threat in the interests of India.
National security of India.
So, I mean, I said, well, Gitanjali can't get a passport, but at least Suhasini should be able to get a passport. Suhasini, I think, was 2 and 3 at the time. And I really didn't think she could be a threat to India.
Sure.
But even she was refused the passport. And mind you, I did try very hard for Chu. I actually contacted somebody, a lady who was in the external affairs, who had been a diplomat, and her husband later became the Foreign Secretary of India. And she said, look, I can't help you, but you have my good wishes. But no passport was coming. Anyway, then I thought of applying through the courts because, if you're a first year, second year law student, you do know that such a thing as a writ petition available. And though writs in those days were very restricted compared to the scope of writs today, I felt I might be able to establish the right, a fundamental right to a passport. I didn't get around to doing it, largely because, there were other things on my mind. And by that time, the emergency came to an end, and we thought that was the end of the matter. It wasn't, because meanwhile, Menaka Gandhi found herself without a passport. And she went to court. And in her case, 5 judges decided that she had a fundamental right to travel outside the country. And she had also a fundamental right to be heard before her passport was refused. And on these grounds and, a lot of technical reasons, her petition was allowed.
Well,
that was not the end of the matter. Years later, I think around 2016 or 2017 perhaps, that is to say after the BJP government had come to power, Suhasini phoned me up one day to tell me something she found very amusing. She had gone to get pages added to her passport. And she found that, it wasn't progressing fast enough. So she went to see the lady in charge, who obviously didn't know anything about the matter. All she knew was that she had been, she had gone through to Suhasini's application and found that there was a note in the passport ministry to the effect that please do not give this woman a passport without checking with us. Apparently, and it all hailed back to 1976, when I had applied for Suhasini's passport. She was 3 years old, and they had refused the passport and put in a footnote saying, don't give this woman a passport, this baby, I should say, a passport without checking with us. So that was the position. At that time, by the way, the present External Affairs Minister, Sri Jaishankar, was at that time our Foreign Secretary. And he was a good friend of Suhasini's, whose own father-in-law had one time been Foreign Secretary. And when he heard this story, he told her, he said, you see how acute the External Affairs Ministry officials are. They had even decided that Chu, age 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever she was a menace to society, and her passport should be very carefully vetted.
Well, I got my revenge when the government cancelled my passport. But I traveled on it. And when I went to Washington, the airport, the Indian embassy people were there, and they told the immigration that his passport has been cancelled. And therefore, please don't allow him and hand him over to us. We'll take him to the embassy, and therefore after that, we'll take him to India. Now, that time, because Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State, and all my Harvard colleagues, they're very eminent, they knew everybody in the government. And so they had told Kissinger to tell the entire immigration that, they should not honor the Indira Gandhi government's cancellation because it is without any basis, without giving an opportunity for him and so on. So when I landed there, when they said this, the immigration officer, who's of course already been instructed, he said, can I see your passport, Dr. Swamy? So I gave it to him. He went through the page, and gave it back after putting a stamp on the entry. So the embassy people got upset. They said, "What is this?" He said, "I've just been through his passport. Nowhere it is written, it is cancelled." They said, "That's because he has not handed over the passport to us. We have passed an order. Here's the order." He said, "I don't care for your piece of paper. Unless it is written on the passport, it is cancelled. We will not honor it." And I went all over Canada, UK, so many places with a cancelled passport. And Mrs. Gandhi was so upset that she sent the ambassador to Harvard, because Harvard, in order to facilitate my going around, they gave me back my old job and as a professor, and that gave me a lot of status in America. And the ambassador met the dean, and he said that Swamy is a criminal. He's got 18 cases against him, and therefore you should not have made him a professor here, and you should hand him over to us. So he said, first you withdraw the emergency, then we will consider. But at this stage, there is no law in your country. Your constitution has been suspended. So all these things show the weak ground with the Congress was, and I made so much fun of it. And particularly they are coming to Parliament going, that they were so angry with me. They attached our property, took away my car, all this they did. But still we did not bend. And I'm saying we are very happy with the experience.
Yes. So, but all was not entirely well. As I recall from ma'am, on the chapter where you were expelled from the Rajya Sabha, that was
Yes.
a point when your own party, people in your political outfit, did not lend support that they ideally should have. And even sort of support from the legal community was scarce. Ma'am, you write that even without the assistance from the Jansangh, Swamy prepared the papers of his challenge to his expulsion to the eminent jurist, Mr. M.C. Chagla, whose selfless work thereon shall be remembered with deep gratitude. Now, Mr. Chagla and again, erstwhile Justice Chagla, undoubtedly a great doyen of the bar again when he was practicing at the Supreme Court. He himself was a great critic of the emergency and Mrs. Gandhi. And could you shed some light on sort of what behind that, sort of not getting support from the legal community, and how did you go about sort of at least the initial process? Because we know that on some level it did become infructuous when the elections were announced. And we will obviously move to that thumping victory later, but if you could sort of shed some light on that area.
No, there was from the beginning a schism between Jansangh and RSS. Because of Nanaji Deshmukh, who was an RSS man, they have their loaning system. RSS loans the general secretaries or organization secretaries from RSS to Jansangh without their becoming members of Jansangh. So Nanaji laid the foundation that we must fight against the emergency. And Mr. Vajpayee had very good relations with Indira Gandhi, and he thought by persuading her, she might withdraw the emergency, and that my activities was actually angering her. And in no meeting with him and her, my name would come up, and she would spend most of the conversations on me, why they are not forcing me to surrender. So, but the RSS kept telling me, you are not to surrender because you are now for us an image for our people, and they all have hope you will do something. So you can't. So when the question came up that I had said in an interview in Canada that Indian Parliament, because the question was, Parliament is passing all this, so how can you say it's illegal? I said, Parliament is a captive institution. It's dominated by communists. Our people don't attend it. So therefore, anything they pass is not worth the paper on which it is presented. So they took that as an insult to Parliament. In addition, you see, we had a rule that if you are in Delhi, then you are entitled to your emoluments. I I was there very much in Delhi. I was, in fact, inside Parliament. They all saw me. I'd signed the register also. And but they said, no, we have no proof that he was in Delhi. He must come to the house and say that he was in Delhi. Then only we'll believe. I said, this is wonderful. I'm certainly not going to come to the house because unless you allow me to give it in writing, I'm going to give it in writing, my explanation. But they wanted to expel me because somehow Mrs. Gandhi was so angry, upset. She wanted some revenge. So she thought that once I don't have a member of parliament, I won't have status abroad. My status abroad was because I was a Harvard professor, not because there are lots of ex-presidents and all that floating around in these countries of England and America. So therefore, when Mrs. Swamy spoke to Vajpayee, he said, no, I will not do. He took, his allowances. Well, allowances I'm entitled to even if I don't go, as long as I'm in Delhi. And everybody knows I was underground in Delhi. And then I had come into parliament. But I think Mr. Vajpayee and I had problems because he had problems with Nanaji. And he had, in fact, sent me a message saying that I should surrender. And Nanaji said, no, you are not to surrender. And this is the reason why the Jansangh, which is now was not very big that time, I think it's 7 or 8 people only, decided to be lukewarm by boycotting. They didn't say, no, I should be punished. But they didn't help my wife in any way in preparing these papers and submitting to her. I had given everything in writing. But then after I was expelled from parliament, the elections were declared within 2 months. And I came back, contested the election and became Lok Sabha MP. And Mrs. Gandhi, I moved the resolution to have her expelled in 1979. Mrs. Gandhi for obstructing information for the Maruti car question. We made a charge sheet and Moraji and Charan Singh backed me fully. There also Vajpayee opposed me fully. And we got her expelled. And so, the law of karma catches up with everybody. That is the answer. Yes, there's a question.
So we'd like to get ma'am's views on the legal side as well. That, ma'am, what was it like at the bar? So sure, you were a late entrant into the profession, and what was it that was the response from the side of the bar? Certainly to the emergency, there was one wing, but post that, what were some of the key cases that you were involved with?
Post that, I was a very normal career. I was fortunate enough to be a junior in the chamber of Mr. Sorabji, who later became Attorney General of India. And his practice was mostly in the Supreme Court, and it was mostly concerned with human rights. At least the portions I was concerned with was human rights. So I had a very good opening to, build up a career in writ jurisdiction. And that was extremely helpful later on, because at some stage, Swamy decided he was going to exercise all his fundamental rights, and he was going to exercise them in person. And so, it became sort of standard. I would look at the matter and say, well, I don't think you should do this. I think this is the remedy available to you. And he would say, no, I know how to do these things. You just prepare the papers as best you can. I'm afraid I was not quite as good a junior as, for instance, your brother, who, when Swamy gives him something to draft, he drafts it the way Swamy wants it. Whereas I would bring...
No, much better than what I can draft.
Yes, much better, but at least in line with Swamy's views. Whereas I had a very obstructive role, and, I would say something like, well, Swamy, this is not really a fit case for the Supreme Court. Why don't you go to the High Court for it? And he would say, no, I want to go to the Supreme Court.
And I would get admitted.
He got relief to an extent that other people didn't get. But it was a very rewarding experience. What I'd learned in Soli's chamber came of assistance to me when I started preparing Swamy's briefs. And he used to argue them, and he did a very good job of it. There was one case where he was to argue the matter. This was regarding Jai Lalita's
The
expulsion from the
removal from a chief minister's post.
Yes, you're right. And Swamy was going to argue it, and I got up to ask Justice Barucha, can you give me a date when Dr. Swamy can appear in the matter? And he said, why? He has a perfectly good counsel. He has an advocate on record. No, I will not give him permission to argue. So I was forced to argue the case myself. And I think I got good relief in the matter. I was very fortunate in the people I worked with. It wasn't only Mr. Sorabji. My fellow juniors included Harish Salve, Anu Haksar, Gopal Subramanian. They were way ahead of me in their understanding and application of the law, but they didn't hesitate to help me when I needed help. Then there were some cases in which, for instance, I worked with Fali Nariman. These were minority educational rights matters. Again, as I said, it helped working with people like that because they had this brilliance, the ability to see exactly the point which would gel with the court. It taught me a lot of things. I think the last case I was involved with was the Ram Janmabhoomi. Just to have his bottle around for it by when Swamy was in case. But, the Ram Janmabhoomi matter, the final hearings, stretched on and on for, I think, 50 days. And Swamy was in no position to be there for 50 days. So I put it in court and take down notes for him. I amplified the notes and explained them to him in the expectation that in the final analysis, he would argue the points as they arose. And I had, up in court and had asked the Chief Justice, because everybody was given a very restricted amount of time in which to argue. And I'd said, I think Dr. Swamy will require only about an hour before your lordships. But if your lordship will give me that 1 hour, it will be very helpful. And the Chief Justice's reaction to start with was quite hostile. He said that I don't want to hear him. Then that same day in the afternoon, he called me in court and said, we will give Dr. Swamy an hour. And, I was so grateful. I said, Lordship, I can assure your Lordship that he will not take more than an hour because he has all his points ready. And the Chief Justice actually said, we know Dr. Swamy, we know he will not waste our time, that he always comes well prepared. So we sat back smugly until the last day. When,
that's how it went. The courts generally recognized that I was not just coming for effect, that I had studied the law and then made points. In fact, most of my cases now are reported cases, especially on temples and then the corruption, the 2G, and so on and so forth, you see. So therefore, it's not just any petitioner in person. It was a person who studied it. And of course, now, even though I'm a lawyer, I've got lots of lawyers who as students came up and become lawyers now. So I think that every young person should learn law, and we should make law, at least some papers, compulsory in the first year of your college. And even in class 10 and class 11 and 12, the fundamental rights question should be educated properly through there for the young people. There was a question from Harish Sharma, is it? Yes.
What's the question?
Can you hear? Can you what is it? It is. His voice is not coming, I think.
Yes. I believe so. That must be on the YouTube. I think I have the other screen open in front of me. So if Satya is there, he can perhaps help us with what the question is, because that question is not in front of me.
put up his hand, so that's why I said, okay.
I see.
Okay, for YouTube, okay, it's not possible. All right, no problem.
I see. I see. Yeah. So, sir, yeah, we will deal with a couple of questions, like I said, pertaining to the emergency, and I'd like to hear your views on this. We've been witnessing over at least the last few days many lawyers who've been writing that while there is no declared emergency, the institutions are equally vulnerable today. And so we had Mr. Prashant Bhushan, who would sort of discuss this matter yesterday and day before. Just last night, yesterday, we had the piece by Mr. Navroz Silva, a senior advocate of the Bombay High Court, who had written extensively, not in the sense of the environment, but he pointed out to the workings of the Supreme Court and the like. Without getting into the specifics of the details that these people have highlighted, you are two individuals who've suffered through the worst days of the emergency, as it was, as the tangible reality that the emergency was. Would you hold the same view? Would you think that it would be wise to equate those days to today, 45 years later, that the situation is the same, or do you think that would be slightly fallacious?
No. Today's situation is not at all comparable to the emergency. Today, you can go to court and look at Tista settled one. All attempts of the government have failed because the court was ready to settle midnight. On a telephone call, they gave, because there is a shortage of time, the Chief Justice gave bail on a telephone call. So I don't think it's a comparable situation. And I think much of it is exaggerated because most people don't like the BJP's ideology of Hindutva. They think that, you see, what happened is when the Congress, after independence, the Congress worked on the principle that if the Hindus could be divided on caste, region, language, and all these bases, and the minorities can be united, then there is a chance of getting elected. Because once you Brahmins vote this way, Kshatriyas vote this way, North Indians vote this way, South Indians vote this way. This kind of division, this 82% Hindu becomes broken up into little pieces. And then the minority, which is 18%, if they remain united, particularly the Muslims and the Christians, then you got a solid start with 18%. And then here, there, on the basis of casteism, you can get vote. And so that formula is what has been followed, and with 43% vote, and even 40% you can get if there's a vote splitting taking place. Now, what the BJP has done is they have brought in a very large number of people to vote, not on the basis of caste, region, language, and so on, but on the issues of Ram Mandir or whether Article 370 should be removed. In a national issue which is very appealing to Hindus. So therefore, the whole targeting today is to say, minorities is being put down, freedom of speech is going on. So this is mostly propaganda. And I don't think very seriously. But one issue I am saying inside the party, I have been saying outside also, that you should not be afraid to speak. And if anyone speaks and is prosecuted for speaking, then of course I'll be happy to take up their case. And I speak what I like in my party. I tell my party, you pass a resolution in the National Executive, I'll obey it, whether I like it or not. But if you have not passed anything and you have made a decision, then I have a right to criticize it in public. For instance, Uttarakhand just now has taken over all the temples, 51 temples, including the Char Dham. Now that is against our party, whole party policy itself. There's no resolution in the National Executive it should be taken over. So I am going on a PIL there, which is what Satya has now produced my written submissions. So therefore, I think what we have to do is encourage people that don't be afraid to speak. And if because you have spoken, some action has been taken, we'll all stand up with you. It cannot be done by our government. But if you have some other problem, you have got you have done some corruption and you want to cover it up with this, that I'm being strangled because I'm not allowed to speak, or this action is being taken because, for instance, on National Herald case, I mean, what do they say? I'm taking vendetta. What do you mean by vendetta? The facts there or not? The court says you are prima facie guilty. They arrested them in court and gave them bail. They are out on bail. How can you now say this is all politically motivated? Those things I don't believe in. And I don't think there's any, except for this, the discipline should not reach a point in a party where you suppress people expressing their views. And that it cannot be done from the top. It has to be done by the members themselves.
Ma'am, would you want to add to that? What would you want to shed light on that?
Question?
Ma'am, the question was pertaining to, you lived through the tangible reality of the emergency back in the day. And many are saying that in the present scenario, it's undeclared. What would be your view?
Emergency. No, I don't think it's anywhere near the emergency. But there's no doubt that there are people who are unhappy with the government and who are projecting the view that they are being persecuted not through the law, but through because of their political views. There is, for instance, due help by people that Muslims are being specially targeted by the government. I don't find that to be accurate. I don't think that is the case. For instance, you know, this whole agitation about the CA, against the CAA. If you have any objections to the CAA and you pursue them through the courts, that's fine. But agitations which reach to the point where the only weapon you have is sitting in, holding up the roads day after day after day, is like, you know, waving a red flag at a bull. It's not to get justice or anything like that. It's just to be such a nuisance that eventually people from the majority community take the law into their own hands. That's wrong. Is that your view also, Mr. Sabharwal? I asked because my own two granddaughters have been very vocal opponents of the CAA. And the point of going to the protest meetings and supporting them. Yeah, and I do know you come from the same university. I thought
Shoka, yes.
I thought possibly the views are commonly held by people like you.
Yeah.
Most certainly, ma'am. I think I'm in agreement with you that we have methods, we have the courts. Today, the courts are more powerful institutions than they were back perhaps in the day. And I think they're enforcing fundamental rights so much more strongly than they were doing in the past. So I think causing sort of public ruckus or causing damage to life and property is certainly not the most ideal way of protesting. I think that part I'm in absolute agreement with. Now that, yes, ma'am.
No, I think that the administration went out of its way to give CAA people opposed to it, to give them a forum to appear. They went out of their way, I feel, to treat them lightly. But they cannot take things lightly when violence is used. Like, for instance, the Jamia Millia agitation had become violent. And I think the government was right in arresting people and taking action there. There is a view held by my granddaughters, for instance, that in fact they were doing nothing poor things. You know, they were being harassed, that they were Hindu goons who were responsible for all the violence, etc. Eventually, courts will decide the issue, but prima facie to me did not look to be correct.
Okay, I think we have run out of time.
Yes. So thank you so much, Dr. Subramanian, Swamy, and Dr. Roxna, Swamy. This has been a great conversation. And we at the IYEA would like to thank our friend at the Virat Hindustan Sangam, Mr. Jagdish Shetty. I'd like to thank our research associates, Kishika, Aman, Ria, and certainly Satya, who's out there taking care of the technical parts on the other side of this conversation. Thank you so much, sir, ma'am, for joining us. Any parting message that you would have for the youth of our country, for perhaps not just the generation after yours, but as ma'am said, your grandchildren's generation, because that's what most of us are a part of. Any special message that you would have for them that you think is appropriate?
I do have a message. I feel that you must be more tolerant. I feel you must be willing to see both sides of the picture. I feel that the majority also has rights, and you cannot decide things purely out of a feeling of deep sympathy for the minorities. I feel that you must be fair.
Certainly. Thank you so much for that, ma'am. So any parting comments from your side? Any message that you have for our youth?
Democracy is the most precious institution mankind has invented. It's not perfect, but there's nothing better. And we have had a taste. You have not, but I have had a taste, and people of my generation have had a taste of what dictatorship means. And therefore, to defend democracy, but to understand what that is, you must know the Constitution. There is no such thing as absolute fundamental right. All fundamental rights are subject to reasonable restrictions.
Hey, look who's there.
So you must therefore be for democracy, for fundamental rights, but also recognize that it's a give and take thing, and therefore there must be reasonable restrictions. And you cannot therefore destroy the very society which gives you the freedom to speak. And your actions cannot be such that you destroy the system which gave you the freedom to speak. And therefore those restrictions are to be taught to our people. When people tell me, I have a fundamental right, well, the answer is, you don't have an absolute fundamental right. You have a fundamental right subject to restrictions which are laid down in the Constitution. And the same thing happened when the other day people said that in the CAA, the Muslims have been left out. And under Article 14, we have equality before the law and should have been included. Well, the proposal was that those who have come to India from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh to India because of religious persecution, they are being given the citizenship. And in the register of such people, there was no Muslim. Why? Because these are Muslim countries. And you cannot have a Muslim coming here saying that I am being persecuted religiously, because you don't expect that. And there wasn't been. But if there's Adnan Sami wants citizenship, we have given him citizenship. We offered citizenship to Tariq Fateh. And so what does it mean that when you say equality has to be between equal categories and not within a category, cannot be between categories. If I as a Brahmin say that I must get reservation in universities and jobs because scheduled castes are getting it, and therefore equality of law, I'm entitled, will anyone accept that? Not at all, because I am not in the persecuted class, whereas the scheduled castes are in the persecuted class. So this is not a question of equality. And my statement that Muslims and Hindus are, and Muslims, Hindus and Christians, all those who are there were Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Parsis. And they were given citizenship. Muslims kept out. I said, these are the people who can be persecuted in Muslim countries. But Muslim getting persecuted in a Muslim country is almost unimaginable. Unless he has said some abusive words about Muhammad or something, then of course he can be persecuted. but then you're not in the religion, you're going outside the religion. So these clarity has to be brought. You cannot say, I will have freedom to say that India should be broken into 20 pieces. Why? Because the Constitution says that anyone in Article, I think it's Article 20, where Article 20 gives all the restrictions that are there, where you cannot say anything against the integrity and sovereignty of India. If you say against that, then you don't get fundamental rights. So these are things that need to be educated. And if you want this democracy to survive, there are rules. If I have no rules on driving my car, there'll be crashes all over the place. Because you say, no, you have to stick to the left line and the people coming agree on the right lane, therefore you have orderly free traffic in our country.
Thank you so much, sir. I think you were referring to 1902, if I'm not mistaken, to get a sense of what you were saying. Yes. So thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for joining us. I would like to leave our viewers with this parting recommendation. I've made a point just in the last few days, I finished this book, and I would personally suggest it for anyone who's a student of politics, history, or of the law. I think the last point that Amrita Chaudhary writes is absolutely apt. She says it's a cross between a political thriller and a story of love and commitment. And I will leave us with this particular point. I think it's at the end of the 1977 Victory chapter, where ma'am writes that she was worried that an electrical wire would fall and would blow up everyone who's dancing on the trucks. And it writes beautifully like a thriller and like a sort of, as they say, a story of love and commitment. And this is the last point that I thought I'd leave with, is where ma'am says that obviously Gitanjali was again and again suggesting, perhaps falsely, that Q had been lost out on a Congress truck. But if anyone were to remember their history, they would know that it was not possible for a Congress truck to be out that night. And ma'am says that she's been part of electoral celebrations since then. It's been 43 years now since 77. But she hasn't seen anything like that. One can hope that we don't return to such a time ever again. And
I guess I'm too young to remember that, but I have never seen such enthusiasm in my life. After that, every election, I was waiting for something like this to happen again. It never has. You know, the outflow, the enthusiasm, the feeling that we had been rescued once and for all. It's never come back.
that's true.
But in the audience, you've got our granddaughter also.
Yeah.
Yes, I know she's there.
So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. We're right at the hour, right at the clock. I think your timing has been perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, sir and ma'am, once again. Thank you.
I should put in a word about you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you so much, viewers. This was being streamed live on YouTube and on our Zoom channel. In a few hours, we will be uploading this video on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for joining us.